everybody. Welcome to the Hallmarkies podcast. And we are really excited today. We have an author on the podcast. Love talking with authors. We're talking with Rachel Fordham today. And Rachel, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
This is so fun because it's, I think you're the only one that this could fit this description because this will be your fourth time technically on Hallmarkies podcast, but this is the first time that I've been able to be on an episode with you, which I don't think there's anybody else that has been on the show that many times without interacting with me. So welcome.
I know. Thank you. I love your podcast. It's so fun to be here.
Because you have been on twice before on Deliver Me a Podcast, which was a series that Casey and Jess and the others did, talking about Postables, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And then you were on regular Hallmarkies podcast, I think it was last year, that I just happened to not be on that interview, that episode. So anyway, it's just wild.
Well, it's super fun to be here. I'm excited.
So we're excited to have we'll talk a lot about your new book, The Letter Tree. Mm-hmm. But since I wasn't on those episodes, I thought it would be fun just to get to know you a little bit as a writer. And so how did you get started writing? What was your inspiration to kind of go down that path?
Yeah. So I started writing because I was like in a really busy stage of life, and I sort of felt like I needed a creative outlet. Mm-hmm. And my husband jokingly said, well, you read so much, why don't you write a book? And I thought, okay, I'm going to do that. And it was like this whole new part of me just kind of came alive, and I got lost in it, and I wrote a book, and then I wrote another one. And then I was like, what do I do with them? I think they're maybe better than just something to slide under my bed, And so it sort of happened by mistake, I guess. But I love it, and I haven't stopped. And I could keep going forever. No shortage of plot lines. It's just a blast.
Mm-hmm. Were they always historical?
So everything I have published is historical, but I do have some contemporary stuff that I hope to publish. Who knows? The sky's the limit, right?
Yeah. So you wrote these books just for fun. Mm-hmm. And then what was your process like as far as finding a publisher? Because your original books were with Revel, right? Correct?
Yeah. So originally, I always say that I learned everything backwards. I knew nothing about publishing. I didn't tell anyone I was writing a book besides a couple family members. So I was actually out to lunch with an author friend, but she didn't know I had written a book. And I was like, so if somebody wrote a book, what would they do next? And she was like, well, you'd probably want to query an agent. I was like, okay. And then I get home and I have to Google, what does it mean to query an agent? And so I wrote to some agents. I didn't know much about them. They were names that I'd found in the back of books that I had read. And I ended up getting a couple offers for representation, which was just mind-blowing to me. And then they found my original publisher, and I was with them for 5 books, and they were wonderful. And now I'm with HarperCollins. So
that's so exciting. Yeah. That's great. You must have just gone crazy when you found out that well, first of all, that you got an agent, but then that when you sold that first book, that must have been very exciting.
It was really exciting, and it definitely felt kind of surreal. And it's a story that I love because I feel like, it just kind of all worked out how it was supposed to for me. But I also recognize that there are a lot of incredibly talented authors who, it takes 10 years or something to find an agent. And so I just have so much respect for people who go through that long struggle, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was curious that with the romance genre basically kind of saving publishing right now, that is contributing to 2/3 of the overall gains in publishing in adult fiction, and that unit sales in 2021 for romance grew 40%. So it's just a massive category right now. And I'm just curious why you think that might be, and what do you think the overall appeal to the romance category?
I mean, I'm definitely not an expert on that side of it, but I would say that I think that I sat in a marketing meeting shortly after COVID, and everybody was just talking about how, there's a trend towards people wanted things that made them feel good. Life was hard. And I remember in that meeting they were saying that people wanted relatable romances. Like some of the billionaire type romances were not doing as well as some of these
Mm-hmm.
everyday. They wanted to feel like the everyday person could have a happy ending, and that seemed to be where sort of that darker, unexpected ending had been really popular. Not that it's not still, but had been,
Yeah.
and that coming out of COVID, there was just sort of this desire for a happy ending, and
Yeah.
I'm okay with that because
Yeah.
I think that makes for a better read. So
Yeah. Yeah. So would you describe yourself as a pantser or a plotter?
definitely a pantser. Although I mean, like I think it's a spectrum, and so I usually know like kind of where I want to start and where I want to get to. And if there's a really big historical element that needs to be researched, then I'm gonna do some of that ahead of time. But for the most part, it's discovery writing, and I don't exactly know what path it's gonna take me on until I get there, and it
Mm-hmm.
makes it
Mm-hmm.
fun.
Ho, ho, ho. We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies Patreon.
Do you love Hallmarkies podcast, especially at Christmas?
Do you enjoy the holiday previews, recaps, interviews, and bonus episodes?
If the answer is yes, please consider supporting the Hallmarkies Patreon. We need your help to do what we do both during the Christmas season and all year round.
But not only do you help a podcast led by strong, independent women by becoming a Patreon, you get to become a part of the Hallmarkies family.
Starting at only $2 a month as a patron, you will have access to our Facebook Patreon group where we talk about the movies, shows, and more all year.
We also have many monthly patron watch-alongs with guests like Lacey Chabert, Natalie Hall, Paul Campbell, Mary Lou Henner, and more, giving their behind-the-scenes details of their films.
As a patron, you also have the chance to provide input into the podcast and even join us at different tiers.
So this Christmas season, spread some cheer to the Hallmarkies Patreon and become a member today. You won't regret it.
Go to patreon.com/hallmarkies to learn more.
That's patreon.com/Hallmarkies.
You're a big postable. You've been on the Deliver Me podcast a couple times. And of course, this new book involves letter writing. And then you've had others that involved letter writing. So I'm just curious about that. What do you think there is about letters that makes it especially literary?
So my second book was Yours Truly Thomas, and that's the one that the Postable kind of latched onto, and I published it, and then I started getting emails from readers saying, "Have you ever watched Signed Sealed Delivered? You should watch it. It's like takes place in the like the current times dead letter office." And I was like, "No, I haven't watched it. Finally, I told my husband, I was like, "I am going to watch this show so I can start telling people that I did." But I
Yeah.
kind of went in with like a low expectation, and I totally fell in love with it. Like, and it was so family friendly that like we binged watched it with our children, which they had never really like dove into a series like that. And so it just made for this really fun summer. So not only did I love the show, but I loved, the experience that I had with the show.
Yeah.
And then it was so fun to connect with readers who were also viewers of that show. So it was just great fun. I also got to go to Ramadrama, meet the cast and sit on panels, and it was so fun. But I didn't set out to be like a letter writing author. That just was the case in that story. None of my books purely epistolatory, but it just
right.
there are times when like even when we text or we have a phone call, like we communicate a little bit differently. And so there's just certain times in a novel when like the written word, something that someone's like poured their heart into, or they're being exceptionally vulnerable, just makes for a really like either romantic or poignant moment in a story. And so, in the case of the letter tree that comes out, this month, it's these people don't really know each other. So, it's allowed them, I mean, they know each other really, really well in the written word, right? But not in person. It just sort of made for a fun component to the story.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, like Jane Austen was the queen of the swoon-worthy letter.
Like
So,
persuasion, like I'm half agony, half hope. Oh.
Exactly. Yeah. The best.
Yeah. I love it.
Yes. And so, yeah, I think it works really well. And I agree with you about the Postables. I think that series, Signed Sealed Delivered, is the strongest thing that Hallmark's ever made. as far as I mean, The Way Home was very good, but we only have one season, so we'll see. But I loved that show so much, and particularly the Christmas movie, I think is the finest thing that Hallmark's ever made. I
Oh,
absolutely love
I
it.
would agree with you. I mean, I love it from the, just the entertainment point of view, but as an author, like, I just have so much respect for Martha Williamson being able to take that, to be able to so gently work those characters through like their trauma in this very like
Yeah.
entertaining. Love that she let Rita and Norman kind of be like quirky characters who are not treated like they are secondary, but that their storyline is so valid and so
Yeah.
beautiful. So yeah, I think I mean, I would love to write a TV show someday, and she would definitely be someone that I would look to as inspiration. So
Yeah, it would have been really easy, especially with Rita, to make her too sort of manic pixie, and not give her like real
yeah.
teeth that they do. And you're just so invested in them as a couple and as humans. And in that Christmas movie, I just think it's so lovely the way that it truly handles themes of faith and loss and grief with such grace. And
Mhm.
it's not preachy at all. It's just authentic to these characters and their experience.
Yeah, I mean, it's just really beautiful, and there's so many episodes that like make you tear up.
Hmm.
It allows those four characters to be multidimensional. They're all treated like, they're not just a tool to progress the story. Like
Yeah,
and so yeah,
I
I love
agree.
it. I'm like ready to go binge watch it again. It's been
Yeah. Yeah. I know that was the only downside to the girls doing Deliver Me a podcast, which was brilliant, and I totally supported them doing it, is that I was only on the show on that segment series one time, and so I didn't really get to, and we've covered the newer movies, of course, but I didn't really get to geek out about Science Hill Delivered like I might otherwise have.
yeah, I
Which,
need to do it because it's time to watch it again.
yeah, hey, yeah, there you go. But I like I said, especially that Christmas movie, I think it is absolutely, it's a movie that's actually about Christmas and the
Hmm.
atonement and everything that is healing
Right.
about Christ and his gift to the world. But it's so well calibrated, so well done that it, at least to me, I don't think it feels pushy on Shane, as she's having her journey, and uh on uh on Oliver, and he's dealing with his grief and his loss and all of it. I just love it. I think it's so good.
No, it's really brilliantly done.
Mhm.
I think that a lot of us authors could take notes on that, because
Yeah.
he does balance the, the faith and the story in a way that doesn't feel like one's dominating the other. Like they just
Yeah,
walk hand in hand really well.
it's very difficult, very,
Yeah.
very, very difficult to do.
Hey, this is Jen Johans, host of the podcast Watch with Jen, which delivers a steady stream of great movie recommendations, thoughtful career deep dives, and first-rate conversations with film critics, authors, actors, journalists, filmmakers, and more. You can find Watch with Jen wherever you get your podcasts, or hear us first at our Patreon at patreon.com/filmintuition.
Yeah, so I think that it's fun that you were able to combine a lot of different story elements in this new book, The Letter Tree, and get some inspiration from things like Science Hill Delivered and in this new book. Why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about The Letter Tree?
So I mean, I jokingly call it like You've Got Mel meets Romeo and Juliet meets Rapunzel meets 1920s. It's kind of a modgepodge of a lot of things, but at the heart of it is, these feuding families that love is what's going to ultimately like bring, reconciliation uh, and forgiveness and all of these things. But it's set to just a really fun backdrop. I think the setting is something that I just loved because I lived in Buffalo for 4 years, and So a lot of the settings are places, like the tree that they go to that is where they exchange letters is in the Buffalo Zoo, which is where I used to take my toddler. And so it's just very fun for me in those ways. But it's a really fun setting. The 1920s, I was a little scared of because I felt like, all I could really think of was like The Great Gatsby, and I didn't want to write a Great Gatsby novel, but I was able to just really fall in love with this era. And it was just a really unique time in history. So it was fun to capture that, but I don't know, I'm like rambling, but it's a romance between like star-crossed lovers in the 1920s, and it's lots of fun.
Mm-hmm. So it's about these two people that their families are rival businesses,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Yep.
Yes. And the Campbells versus Bradshaws, right? And they don't, families have this feud, they don't like each other, but then they are exchanging these letters unbeknownst to
Right.
that they're just, and it's interesting because this idea of the original play was called Perfumery, and then Perfumery was then made into Shop Around the Corner, and then Shop Around the Corner was Good Old Summertime, and then Good Old Summertime, and then eventually it ended up as You've Got Mail, and of course there's She Loves Me on Broadway, which is brilliant. This story has just evolved over the years, and there's just something I think that is romantic about the idea of falling in love over your words,
Right.
and especially two people that in real life don't even like each other, but their words, they're in love with their words. I just think it works.
And I think it kind of works in a way because we love tropes, but we've got enemies to lovers and friends to lovers happening at the exact same time.
Yes.
So you get caught up in both of them. I mean, she's falling in love with his words while she hates him in real life. And it's just fun. And I think it challenges us. Maybe that's why we like it too, is because it makes us think like, do these other people that I'm crossing in my life, like, would we have a different relationship in a different setting? Like, it was fun. And it was actually, I didn't really set out to have it be a You've Got Mail originally, but I wanted to do a feud. That's the element I knew going in, because I hadn't written a feud, and that seemed like a fun thing to tackle. And so I started reading old feuds, hoping that I would get like a little bite of inspiration. And, I read about like the Hatfields and the McCoys and, all of these, but then I read about this company that over in Germany during World War II, I believe. No, I'm thinking, okay, I think it's World War II. Yeah, World War II. And they were a family. In that case, it was a family business, and they end up separating because of some things that happened in World War II. And they become two different businesses, and one becomes Adidas and one becomes Puma. And I just like the whole town, like which shoes you wore kind of told which side of the feud you were on. And so it's definitely not in any way based on that, but that is the one that sort of captured my attention and made me go, what if, until I got to my own story.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's an interesting dynamic to set your two characters, because there's so much that's kind of out of their control. And so then they have to respond to it, and they have to and it can feel kind of like there's no hope for our characters, but then of course there is, because it's a romance, but so that it draws you in.
No, it's fun to know, because some books you're not supposed to know the ending. Like you go into a romance and you kind of know the ending, but it's how are they going to get there? That is the fun part. And I think sometimes on this one you go, I don't know.
Yeah, that is one nice thing as a critic, that I have to be so careful in most of my mainstream reviews to not, like, I really can't share almost anything about the plot these days. Like, people will accuse you of spoilers for the most inane details. You're just like, what? I remember someone got mad at me for my saying that there was time travel in Avengers Endgame. I'm just like, come on, like everyone knows, like, it's what? Give me a break. Anyway, and you have to be so careful, but that is one nice thing about covering romance, is that, not that I would like, I guess technically you could spoil it, but everybody knows the endings of these movies. So you don't really have to worry about that in the same way that I have to worry about with other stuff, which is kind of nice.
Agree. Yeah, that is nice. I mean,
yeah.
So but it is
it's the journey.
I feel the same way. My next book, my 2024 book, I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to do interviews on it because there's just some things I'm not going to be able to say, but I want to say them because people are going to want to hear them, So
yeah, sometimes there's
I'll
like a
cross that
nice
bridge when I get
twist or something like that can be
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the romance part of it, we can talk about. It's just all these other elements. I'm like, it's going to be hard.
Yeah. So how did you come up with Laura and Isaac as characters, like in developing kind of their personalities?
Well, it felt like it would be fun for them to each have had a unique experience because of the feud. So her family, because of the feud, has sort of sheltered her to an extreme to where she's kind of secluded. And, I kind of compare her to Rapunzel. She's not quite to that extreme. She can get out some, but she's been very like isolated in a sense. And he's kind of the bachelor that everybody is interested in. And so there, then you get a little bit of an opposites too. But at the heart of it, they're really similar because they both, I mean, in their letters, they just know each other so well. And they're both kind of lost in their circumstances, but it's presenting in very different ways. And so so I was mostly just going for this element of I don't know. They both just needed things that they were going to have to grow and overcome. And so for her, it's finding her voice in a world that she's been kind of, she hasn't been able to use her voice. And for him, it's trying to figure out who he is when everybody expects him to be one way.
So. Yeah, he's kind of playing the part.
Yeah.
But that's not really who he is.
But the only person who really knows who he is this writing letters too, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, was it fun writing the kind of villain, Abel?
Yes, it was fun. I actually feel like he's one of the things that every round of editing I went through, I was always trying to refine more and more because he was somebody who started out for me being sort of just a tool. He was something that it was supposed to help progress the plot along, and then to try to go back and give him flesh him out a little bit more and figure out who he was so that people would, and figuring out how to have everyone else figure out who he really was. So he was someone that was maybe a little bit more tricky to write, but I really enjoyed writing him. I think there's people like that who kind of deceive us a little bit. And and I think, but I had to be believable enough because we want to love our heroine. And so I didn't want him to be too obvious. Right. So,
yeah.
So it was fun. It was a fun challenge. And
yeah. Cause you don't want him to be too much like a Gaston or something like that, which is fun for that movie, but you know.
Well, and it works in that movie because she never likes him. So we don't lose respect for him.
Right. Yeah.
In this case, Laura really, really considers him because she wants to break free and she thinks he might be the way out, and so he couldn't be as obvious because people would lose respect for our heroine. And
yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So was it hard writing the actual letters that you do when you include a letter? Was that hard to to make it sound authentic and oh, this person would really write this letter?
I actually really, really, really love the letter writing part. Every time I put one in a novel, it's just usually they're put in at a place where it feels like it's almost easier to tell that bit of a story that way. The only challenge in this one, I think, was that some of the original letters that they refer back to were written when they were 14 years old. And so to make sure that their voice sounded younger, as than the current letters, but still sounded like them.
We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies merch store.
Are you looking for that perfect gift for the postable, Hardy, or Hallmarkie in your life?
What about getting that t-shirt or hoodie that will help you stand out at your next holiday party?
Now is the time to check out the Hallmarkies merch store.
Full of festive designs by artists like Jessica Miller, Carrie from Hallmark Comics, and more.
You can even have more than just shirts, but totes, cell phone cases, notebooks, mugs, and more.
And it isn't just Hallmark. We have designs for Anna Green Gables, Man from Snowy River, The Nanny, and more.
Every purchase at the merch store goes to help support the podcast and allows us to make the great content you know and love.
There are frequent sales, so go to tpublic.com/stores/Hallmarkies or see the link in the description.
That's tpublic.com/stores/Hallmarkies.
That makes sense. I feel like that would, because I think that when you, and this is different than email, talking about you've got mail, that there's something about when you're actually writing a letter that you like think about every word in a way that you don't in even an email or your normal conversation.
Yeah, and I think especially back then, I mean, I guess not so much in this book, but like especially my like yours truly Thomas book, like like paper was expensive. Sending a letter was expensive. Like this might be the only communication I have with this person for, particularly then when there was no phones and stuff for such a long time. Like I better be careful what I say. We could probably all take a lesson in that, right?
Yeah.
We were able to like, I'll leave that comment and not think it through.
You know what you would like? Well, it's a slightly more mature than Hallmarker things, but I don't think it's too bad. Is the Dash and Lily? Did you ever hear about this Dash and Lily?
I don't think so, but I'll write it down.
Yeah, it's on Netflix. We only got one season, but it was a really cute season, and it kind of similar in the sense of that. So they're these people that there's teens, and she puts a letter in a book in this store, and then the male character finds the letter, and they start writing, leaving each other letters around the city. And then it's really cute. But yeah, that idea of kind of like, I don't know, finding somebody to communicate with it's just it's so attractive, it's so appealing.
Well, I think, we see it, I think even today, I guess this has the anonymity factor, but how many people have like kind of a virtual friend that they talk to often?
Yeah.
Like half my writer friends I have never met in person. We just, reach out to each other when we have a problem or something. So
that's true. Most of the co-hosts on the podcast I haven't met in person, which is kind of wild. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. I've met a handful of them, but yeah,
have like a retreat or something.
I really want to. I'm trying to make it work. Maybe sometime next year doing something, but yeah, if people want to support the Patreon so that we can meet, please.
Yeah, there you go.
It would really help us a lot. But yeah, I enjoyed the book. I thought it was very sweet and endearing and engaging, and I really liked their romance. And he, as is typical in the perfumery stories, he finds out first and who she is, and he can't believe it that of all the girls and all that it would be her. So then he kind of has to grapple with it, and I liked him as a character. I thought he was good.
Yeah, well, one of the fun elements, so when I had him find out, I started thinking, sort of about like the trajectory of You've Got Mail. And in that book, he keeps his identity a secret for a really long time. And I just felt like today's readers might not embrace that quite as much, and so I tried to find a way for her to find out. But then one of my favorite parts is that little period of time when they both have discovered who the other person is, but they don't know the other person knows who the other person is. Anyway,
I love that.
It just made it fun because it put them both on equal ground, but they didn't know they were on equal ground. I don't know. It was fun.
I like that too. Yeah, it works in the perfumery like movies and plays because we as like an audience can kind of be a participant in the whole, like we know, and what does she know, and sort of it works on that level. But I think for a book, it works also to have them, because you want them to like.
But it could work either way. It's just,
it could. That's true.
There's some readers who, and I think because they had so many things they needed to work out together, that would have maybe felt like in this particular book, had I drug it on too long, that it was, I don't know, borderline, like he's, I don't know, I don't want to say like abusing her, but like, I don't know, keeping her in the dark for too long would have, I don't know, I can't say the right words, but you know what I mean? Like would have been unfair to her. And so, some of them it's so lighthearted, and this is a light book too, but some of the issues that they were dealing with are pretty big stuff. And so they needed to communicate. And so they do find out, which was
really cute.
Because they had to, we had to have a little like physical chemistry as well, right? which we all like, is right.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on the book. I really enjoyed it, and people can check it out. I'll put our affiliate link in the description. And when is it released?
October 31st.
Okay, great. Well, we like to end our interviews with some fun get to know you questions. And I'm not sure if you've done these, but
It's all right.
I'm not sure if you've done these in your other interviews, but so bear with me, but it'll be fun. And so with Christmas coming, these are the holiday get to know you questions.
Okay.
What's your favorite Christmas song or carol?
Okay, I'm gonna go with Until You, and partly because, and that's by Danny Goki, and partly because my foster daughter that I had, just for some reason it just touched her heart, and then when it touched her heart, it touched my heart because she just loved it. So
Oh, cool. I don't know that. Very good. What is your favorite classic Christmas movie?
White Christmas.
Oh, okay. Good. Good. Okay. Which do you like better, Scrooge or the Grinch?
Scrooge.
Okay, good. Okay. Which do you like better, clear lights or colored?
Clear.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would you rather be in a snowball fight or build a snowman?
Snowball fight.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would you consider yourself a good gift wrapper or not?
Not.
Okay.
That was an easy one.
Okay, good. All right, last question. Do you have an ugly Christmas sweater?
I do. Yes.
What's your ugly Christmas sweater?
I think it's like an alpaca with with Christmas clothes on. I should have worn it. Maybe it's a llama or alpaca.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, good. That sounds good. Well, very good. You did it. You answered all the questions.
Thank you. Oh, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's so nice to get to finally meet you and talk about your writing. So thank you for coming on. And if people want to follow you on socials or anything like that, how do they do that?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram at Rachel_Fordham. I'm on Facebook, Facebook/Rachel Fordham fans, and I have a newsletter, rachelfordham.com. So I'm all over the place.
Great. We'll have all that information in the description, so make sure y'all check that out. And you can find me at Rachel's Reviews, all of our social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. Check that out. Also, make sure that you are following the podcast, Hallmarkies Pod and Hallmarkies Podcast, all of our social media. And if you are listening on iTunes, please leave your ratings and reviews for us. We really appreciate that. And if you are watching on YouTube, please give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. We appreciate that so much. We also have our Patreon group and merch store. Check that out. And thanks again. And we'll talk to y'all later. Merry Christmas, everybody. Bye.
Bye.